We're out. America is out of Afghanistan, at least for now. American diplomats have left the country. The US embassy is gonna remain closed despite an announcement earlier this year that it would remain open even after we left the country. The military has now completed its withdrawal. For the first time since 2001, there are no US soldiers in the country. Although I will add, supposedly. I mean, okay, there's not 5,000 soldiers. You believe no CIA, no nothing? Okay, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, at least the formal withdrawal has now been completed. It does leave, especially because it appears to have been concluded a little bit early on the deadline. As many as 200 American citizens and tens of thousands of Afghans were left behind during this airlift that the Secretary of State calls one of the largest evacuation efforts in US history. Secretary of State demanded that the Taliban keep its word and allow them to leave safely once they had exit documents in hand. And so 200 American citizens, many other allied Afghans being left behind. More than 123,000 people were evacuated from Kabul over the past couple of weeks, including about 6,000 American citizens. So there's a lot going on, obviously. Wosny, I don't know, you've been away, so I don't know how much time you've had to talk about this. It's the end to a very significant, almost entirely dark chapter in American history.
Yeah, and what I would want the viewers of TYT to remember most about all of this is 20 years, $2 trillion spent propping up this government, the Afghanistan government, and that thing fell down like a pile of bricks in 7 days. 7 days, 20 years, tens of thousands of Afghans died. Numerous American soldiers died, and that government fell in 7 days. It's pathetic. And so when you see these guys go on the cable news shows, or they pen their little op-eds in the Washington Post and Politico and all these other places, and they're talking about why and how we should stay there permanently. Just remember that, and also remember that, on Dick Cheney's first tax return after the war, he reported $20 million in income from his position at Halliburton. Like, that's what he reported to the IRS. So God only knows how much money him and his cronies in the defense industry made off of this endless war that never had any points to it, never had any merits. It's awful.
Yeah, you hear, Trump and other Republicans have been focusing on this $84 billion in military equipment that the Taliban's taking control of. Like, I feel like they keep saying that number because they don't want you to think about the fact that, like, they're pretending they're mad about the hardware, but their buddies already got paid for it. They got paid years ago for it. That 84 billion, that's been invested. They put it in Doge. They've made a whole bunch more money. Like, they all got paid. They're frustrated because there's an AR-15 that some Taliban dude has now, as if they didn't already have enough guns. They already made that money. And so Trump turns around earlier just yesterday and says we should reinvade to get those guns. Okay, maybe that's why, but if we were to do that, you'd be spending billions more on the reinvasion. So it's like, as you point out, it's a tragedy in so many ways. Obviously, the lives lost, including even recently with the US drone strike killing so many members of that one family, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people on top of the money that we focus on so much. And for what? For some groups to have 2 decades where they weren't being as universally victimized by the Taliban, but now we're worried about that same system returning.
Yeah, of course. And again, what's most important to understand is that this could never work. This was never going to be a winnable war in the traditional sense. There was, under no circumstances were we ever going to win Afghanistan from the Taliban. We took over the major city, and the rest of the country, which most of the country is extremely rural, was ruled by the Taliban the entire time, right? Like they never left. We kicked them out of Kabul and they just went back to the countryside and they maintained a constituency over there. And there was no way we were ever going to infiltrate that. And we've known that for like 15 years now. But the business of the defense industry still has to be maintained, right? And so we're building roads in a country where most of these people ride on horseback and donkey. We're training the Afghani military. People get paid to do all of this stuff. American dollars go into paying for all of this stuff. And for what? For nothing. There's no actual goal but to line these people's pockets. To me, that's the craziest part about all of this, is that anybody with half a mind knew that like they could just assess the situation and be like, we can't win this. There's no reason to be here.
And look, I think there are some good-hearted people that like it's devastating. Like, cause you want to help, you want women to be able to go to college courses, like you want these things. And first of all, there's a couple of major issues with that. One is that the people who actually just want what's best for the Afghan people, there's like a lot of like cultural imperialism tied in there. And I don't think that they necessarily want Walmart and McDonald's and all that. But I get that you want them to have the right to have a job and all that. But those people are not the ones who are in charge at any point under any administration over 20 years. There might be some regular people. I don't even think that there's necessarily a lot of Americans like that, but they certainly weren't the ones calling the shots. That sort of rhetoric might have been employed. The idea of we want to make purple thumbs and we want people to have rights, but that's not why we went in. That's not why we stayed. And so it's good to be inspired by that. There's far too few people that want what's best even for their fellow American, let alone are willing to take those progressive values and apply them to people around the world. That usually it stops at our borders. But let's also bear in mind that that's not what was going on over this period of time.
Come on, John, let's be serious. I'm in New York City right now. We could invade Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Those Hasidic women don't go to college. You know what I mean? Like this idea that all we want is for, Amish women to go to college. Like people are allowed to do whatever they want within their culture. It's not really on us to come in and be like, well, these are the American expectations of women, et cetera, et cetera. Like these people have to want it for themselves. It's not on us to go in and sort of impose our will. Let those people do what they want, how they want. Like these factions have been warring for literally thousands of years. And the idea that the US could just come and wave a magic wand and quote unquote solve all of their problems, or just like you said, John, the idea that that's why we went there in the first place is just laughable.
Yeah, and bear in mind, like, obviously, as I always say, I make these comparisons a lot. As I always say, it's very different degrees, but like, like we're trying to get like we've been focusing on women. Obviously, this is not the only issue here, but we've been focusing on the rights of women in Afghanistan. Man, Tucker Carlson was doing like a monologue mocking pregnant female service members like a day ago. Like as I've alluded to, 1 in 5 Americans think interracial marriage is immoral now, not 100 years ago. Like they like attacking transgender athletes has been the rallying cry of the right all year. So, glass ideological houses, I think.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.